This video that you're about to see here is shot outdoors, of course, and it just so happens that after I got all set up, the wind came up pretty strong. There's a lot of leaves rattling from trees all around me here, and sadly the quality of the sound and the talking isn't as good as I would hope to be by a long shot. So please forgive me for that. I'm going to have to probably improve my equipment here. I have a digital recorder, but I need to get an auxiliary microphone for it so that I can put a sock on it and hopefully avoid a lot of these issues in the future. So for now, I appreciate if you can just kind of overlook that failure a little bit and enjoy the content of the show for what it's worth. Have a good one. Hope you enjoy it. Well, here we are, finally. I've been away for about 3 weeks. Had to go down, way down south, about 1,000 kilometers down into the little bit east of the Toronto area. So I haven't had a chance to, obviously had a chance to do the other part of my knife video. My thought was that maybe while I was down there, because it's a different kind of forest that's there compared to this, there's a lot more maple trees. In fact, it's almost all maple trees, oak trees. It's really quite beautiful, but it just didn't happen that way. Partly, it was wicked hot. You know, it was just 40, 42 degrees Celsius, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. The humidity was just took your breath away, and there was just no going out and doing that. You'd just be soaked with perspiration, sitting there trying to talk about something, and it just didn't happen. So finally, I'm home. I've been gone almost 3 weeks. It's so good to be home, but I'd like to carry on a little bit now, finally, the balance of my video on my knives. I think I'm going to do more of this in the future too on other things like various cutting tools. So I'll bring in saws, axes, and other various things that I use, some of which are, you know, a little bit different than some people. One of the things that I think about sometimes is that, and I'm not trying to sort of say one way is better than another, but I watch some of these videos and I talk to people, of course, and it seems like everybody is really caught up on just different tools, different knives, different guns, different everything, just for the sake of the fact that it's something that's new, or it's you know, and they're talking about brand names and part numbers and so on. And I can't help but wonder, do they actually ever go out and use these things? You know, and how effective are they? Is it just something with a new gimmick, a new look to it or something, or is there actually anything better about it that's going to cause it to perform, or allow it to perform better for us when we need it? And I can't help but wonder that. I just think that some people just, you know, collect these things for the sake of having them, and there's nothing wrong with that, because as you'll see here, I've got a few knives here that I have that I don't really use, but that, you know, they mean something to me because, well, for whatever reason. And we'll go through that as we travel along here. So I'm going to bring you in a little bit closer. I'm going to lay the stuff out here and show you a little bit about what I use. So the first one that I've got here will be one of those ones that's it's not one that I use. I got it just because it's an Indian. It's got the Indian head on it here. It's made out of 440 stainless, so it's probably quite heavy too. But it's probably a good knife. I mean, the whole thing is just massive steel here. It's huge. It weighs about a pound. I mean, it's a chunk. Now this is supposed to look like ivory, I'm sure. It's not. It's some kind of plastic, I'm sure, also. But the Indian head and the you can see that pretty good there. And the reason I got this knife, I'll show you the other side, is the same thing basically. You can still hope I'm in the film here. The reason I got this knife is because my ride is an Indian motorcycle, so the Indian knife was kind of cool just because of that. And when I saw it, I wanted it just because. And there's another one here too that for the same reason exactly. This is a leaf. You can probably see. Just looks like a leaf. You can see the veins of the leaf down in there. Again, there's an Indian head right here. I'll bring these things closer. use, but it's just a very cool knife, and there's no lock on it or anything. It's actually quite sharp. It's not a particularly great steel, I don't think. I don't know that it would hold an edge very well, but again, you know, the Leaf and the Indian, I'd never seen anything quite like that, so I decided that, actually I got that at a yard sale for like $3 or $4 or something, so I thought, you know, how wrong can you go for something that's just a little bit different? I've never seen one since, and I've never seen another one like this, so oh, it does have a lock. Oh, it does. Well, what do you know? See, that tells you how much I use this thing. It actually has a lock. So there we go. So that's those two. Those are mostly, well, they're strictly for show. This one's actually in a box. It comes with a box with the velvet liner and everything for display, and it sits in that box in my cabinet down in my den. This one sits in the same cabinet, but just on the shelf. It's just exactly as I got it. This one came with its display box, so I've just left it in there because it's just a handy way to keep it. It's actually quite sharp. This thing, as I said, it's 440 stainless, and that's got a pretty wicked edge. I made sure that all my knives are sharp, whether I actually use them or not. So I put an edge on this. I have no idea whether, you know, it'll hold that edge for any length of time. It's 440 stainless, so if whoever made it did a half-decent job, you know, of tempering it, heat treating it, then, you know, it might actually be a pretty good knife. Bit of a bruiser in your hand, though, but I got great big hands, so it fits actually pretty good, feels good there, but anyways, we'll move on. This knife is Boker. Black flies. Actually, that's a deer fly. Little sheath that I made up for it. Bear claw from one of the bears I get. And this is the pocket knife here, as you can tell by the horn. Now, there was a little insignia in there, a little button that said Boker on it. And that thing popped out, I think, the first couple of months I had this. And I bought this back in like the 89 or 90 or something like that. So I had this thing for a long time, but this is the one that I carry most of the time. And it's Boker Soligan stainless steel, of course. I'm not a huge fan of stainless steel, but you know, in a pocket knife, I think it's probably a good thing because, yeah, this thing is made. You know, there's little wiggles in the blade, and the tip's pretty blunted off now. But that's seen a ton of miles, a ton of years of use. You know, like I said, I've used it for 30 plus years, so it's been around, or 30, whatever. It's been around for a long time, and it gets used almost daily. I made this little sheath, and it just clips onto my belt, or one of my belt loops, and that goes with me pretty much every single day, everywhere I go. Let's see what else we got here. We'll save those for later. There's one other one in here. Put some of these down to the side for the moment. Okay, here we go. This is a knife that I purchased, of course. It's called a Swing Blaze by Outdoor Edge, and I'm kind of leery a lot of times about, you know, sort of gimmicky knives, but this is a skinning knife, and this, I have to admit, is a very cool, very durable knife. It's wicked sharp. I think I've skinned 3 or 4 bears with this thing, and I've never done anything more than just you know, kind of dust it off on a steel. It just holds its edge great. It comes with a black handle. I got the orange handle just so that if it's in the evening, which is when most of the time these things happen, if I drop it, it's that much easier to find. Let's get it out of here. It's got a little bit of jimping on the back, so you can get a good thumb grip on it. It's got a nice deep belly. That's really sharp, so I'm going to be cautious with it. It's got a nice deep belly for the skinning. The thing that's cool about it is on this side, there's a little button. And that little button, when you push it, I'm going to do it the other way so I don't get myself cut. When you push that little button in, it unlocks, and the blade swings, and this one goes into the handle, and this one comes out. It also has a little bit of jimping there, so you can get a good grip. It's completely blunt on the end, so that you can't puncture or cut anything by accident, but this inside edge here is razor sharp. You could shave with that thing. And the whole point is that you use the tip of the blade to put a little puncture just under the breastbone of whatever you're skinning. You slip this in, and so that it's rubbing on anything inside the animal, any intestines or whatever. It's not going to cut them and perforate them, because it's, you know, you can see it's very blunt and very wide and soft and curved here. But this razor edge, you can just unzip it. It just opens that thing up like a zipper. It's just as slick as a whistle, this thing. And then as soon as you've got that done, you can go up and down, you know, the center, up and down the insides of the legs and everything. And then when you're ready to go back to it, you just swing it around, and then you start, you know, taking the hide off. So that's a great knife. I paid something like $70 for it. I don't remember when. It says it's AUS 8 stainless, so it's a good steel. This stuff. This thing works great, and I would recommend that to anybody. The quality of that and the way it works has served me. I've only had it for a few years, and like I said, I've skinned 3 or 4 bears with it, and it's just a great little knife. This is the kind of thing that really shows you that there's really no one knife for the job. You get something like this, you know, you could take a knife like this, not a particularly fantastic design for actually working. Could you skin with that? Obviously, of course you could. A knife is just a flat piece of steel bar with a sharp edge on it. When you get past that, it's the quality of the steel, the angle of the edge, the tempering of it. You know, that's what makes a good knife, and how ergonomic it is in your hand to make it comfortable. That's the difference between just a bar that's got an edge and a good tool. And this is a good tool. I would recommend that to anybody. I've had this for I don't know, about 5-6 years now, I guess. And you know, I would not hesitate to buy it again, and I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it to anybody who's doing a fair bit of that kind of work. Another one I've got. Well, here we go. Let's stick with the specialty knives, as I'll call them. Everybody knows a Rapala knife, fillet knife. Very, very thin, very, very sharp, very, very flexible. You know, can you skin a fish, or could you fillet a fish with something like that? Yeah, of course you could. It's sharp. It'll skin it, clean it, it'll gut it out. But this is going to do a much nicer job. It's going to be so much easier to do, and that's the difference. You know, when you get a knife that's made for a specific job, it doesn't mean you can't do it with another kind of knife. It just means that this knife makes life a whole lot easier when you're doing. And you know, sometimes when I'm out, you know, you're not doing a fish. You're doing, you know, maybe a half dozen fish or something, or depending on how many people are there, you might be doing a whole load of fish. You know, and it's clumsy to do it with this, and it's quick and simple to do it with this. So again, you know, a job specific tool for a specific job, you know, and it makes it just a lot easier and a lot more efficient, and a bit of a cleaner job as well. I think that's, oh well, okay, let's include this as well. I got this out of here, might as well. Wasn't going to use this, but now this is the knife that I carry on my belt mostly. This is a, and you don't, these knives don't have to be expensive. Like I said, these Rapala knives, you can get these things for 25 bucks all day long. The Boker here, I don't know what they're worth now, but back in around 1990 or whenever I bought it, I think I paid about $60 for it. But, you know, I've still got it. The only way you're not going to have it is if you lose it. And, you know, another thing I want to just maybe quick mention about this thing is it's lock up tight. Like, there is absolutely no wiggle in this thing. And it's been used, I don't abuse it. I don't use it for heavy jobs that are too big for what it should be using. But I've used this thing daily, and it's just as tight and locked up, and no wiggle or movement. There's no flex in there. That's just a real good knife. It's not stainless steel. It's not the greatest knife I've ever owned for holding its edge, but you know, there you go. This I've changed this sheath. I've taken this off. It used to be up this way, and designed it as a bit more of a cross draw type. This is a Cold Steel SRK. I'll show it to you in a minute here. I've heavily modified or personalized, let's say. This is like 60 bucks. You know, they're not a lot of $60, $70. They're not a lot of money. And these things are just bulletproof. You know, they got the handle stands up so far. I've had this for a few years. The handle collects little bits of dirt in there, but so what? It's got that Kraton, I think they call it, Kraton handle. Feels like rubber, but it's a lot more durable. And we'll pull it out. The first thing you'll notice is that it's not black anymore. This knife came with that black, I don't know what it was. It was almost like like paint, very durable paint, but it had a slightly coarse texture. It wasn't smooth like a paint job or like the bluing on a gun. It actually had a bit of a texture to it. Over the years, that started to, you know, scuff and rub off and so on. It was pretty tough though. I used it a lot. So I decided at one point there it was starting to get pretty rough, and it seems to me that texture, when you were carving through something, was because it was textured and not dead smooth. You know, it didn't bind up, but it caused a little bit of extra drag when you were cutting. I'm sure it was there, and you can see perhaps here that there's a slight tinting of color there. It's just a carbon steel. It's basically a 1095 steel. So it, you know, now that I've got that covering off, I'm going to have to be very diligent about keeping this thing cleaned and oiled so that it doesn't mark up. But still, you know, it works well. Another thing I did to it, it always had a flat square back, so it was good for a fire steel. But I did a little bit. What I did first, actually, one thing I didn't like about it, it had a kind of a tactical flair to it. And the point, I took a ½ an inch off of it. It was about that long, and I've knocked a ½ inch off. The reason I did that, I don't have a problem with longer blade knives. In fact, I wouldn't mind having a BK7 by Becker, but maybe someday. But it got very, very thin at the tip here, and I guess they say that that's great for, you know, stabbing things or something. And I'm going to tell you, like you can probably see here, you can see that or not, but it's fairly flat now. I've ground that part down there. I re-angled this, and it's flatter, and you can see that it doesn't come to a sharp tip there. And if you look at it this way, again, you can see that the tip comes up kind of blunt. That's pinpoint sharp, folks. If you poked at something with that, with any force at all, it's gonna stick in. I don't care how much thinner they need it to be, but it's a whole. I was concerned myself that I was gonna break the tip off, and it never did, obviously. But it just all those times I used it over the years, it just bothered me. So I thought, okay, when I'm gonna strip this off, I'm gonna reprofile the thing the way I wanted it. The other thing I did was when I was reprofiling it, when I cut the tip back, I cut it back, I think it was about 9/16 of an inch. When I started the bevel, I did not move that back the same 9/16 of an inch. If I had done that, I would have had the same taper that it started with. But by starting the bevel in the same location, rather than moving it back to compensate for the tip being moved back, by moving the tip back and not changing the bevel, I've got a deeper belly now, because the same amount of lift is occurring over a shorter distance. It used to go to here, so there was a little more shallow curve. Now, by being blunter, it has to come down and curve more quickly to start at the same location that it originally did. So that gives me a little bit more belly in the blade. And again, for me, is, you know, for my kind of outdoors that I do here, may not be good for everybody, but again, you know, this is a knife this is a great knife for skinning. If I have that with me, I'll certainly use it because it's just what it's for. But could I skin with this? Absolutely, in a heartbeat, without a thought. When I reprofiled the blade and reprofiled the belly of it here, it already had these little bevels on the sides, but I took them down just a little bit to keep the percentages about the same so that it didn't look too blunt. And also, it had a square back spine here for striking a ferro rod, but I squared it up a little bit more, very carefully, almost polished it, and I'll tell you, you could almost use that as a blade, you know, and as far as, you know, for scraping down a feather stick or whatever, you can see it right there. I mean, you know, that's what the back spine here, so you can see how much so that makes it great for, you know, if you're going to shave down, you know, and you want very, very fine feathers or fray something up just to use as a fire starter, that'll do a great job. I don't normally believe in keeping a knife polished like this. I actually did the work to this just a few days before I left for my trip down south. So I haven't actually used it since I've done this work to it. Just a little bit around the house here, but I haven't actually had it out in the bush since I did that work to it. So you're never going to keep a nice polish on a blade like this, you know, when you're out in the bush working at it. It's just going to show the scuff marks and scratches anyways. So the only reason I did that, to be honest, is that when I was cleaning it up, and then I started, you know, when I took I used just a paint stripper and took off that black surface that was on here, and then I used emery cloth or wet sandpaper or whatever, and I took it down to 400 grit, and I was surprised at how shiny it was getting just doing that. So I thought, what the heck, and just for curiosity's sake, I went to a finer grit, then I went to the buffer, and it polished up pretty good. But I think I'm going to go back to like a 400 grit and just put a satin finish on there, because it's not going to stay like this anyways. Then I reprofiled the bevel, and I did that because it's a kind of a hollow grind, which is a nuisance in the bush for resharpening when you're not at home. I sharpen all my stuff on a Japanese whetstone, but I don't know that this bevel, I don't know if it's as sharp as it was when it was wicked sharp when I bought it. It came right out of the box, razor sharp. I don't know I have no way of measuring if it's as sharp now or not, or more so or whatever. But even after reprofiling it and sharpening it with a 4,000, up to 4,000 grit on my stone, this thing will shave hair without even trying. So I don't know how sharp it was, but it's sure sharp enough. So that's basically my everyday belt knife. This goes with me. It's tough. This thing's a pry bar. It's 3/16 of an inch thick, 1095 steel. Cold Steel Company has a good reputation for how they heat treat their materials, their steels, and this thing is a pry bar. I mean, except for that narrow tip that was on there, which never broke. I'll give it, it never broke, but it made me nervous. So I thought, what the heck, I'm just going to reprofile it here, as I've said. But this thing is just tough. If you just want a knife that you're just going to put on your belt and take it out with you and be absolutely certain that it's reliable, it's going to be there when you need it. I don't care how sharp it is, I don't care how fancy it is, I don't care what fancy name they call the steel it's made out of. If you're out in the bush and your knife breaks, you're done. You know, you don't have a knife. If you're out in the bush and your knife doesn't hold an edge as well, you can resharpen it. Even if you have to find a smooth rock in the river, you can always get something out of it. But you break a knife, you know, what's the point of even taking it? So this thing's a pry bar. And I would recommend this thing to anybody. And, you know, I don't have to say much about Cold Steel SRK because they've been around, I think, for more than 25 years. So, you know, and it stays nicely in the sheath. No chance of it falling out. This part of the sheath, actually, this closure here went around the top and snapped onto the handle for extra strong closure. But now that I'm using it this way, I've just clipped a little flashlight in it. Works good. So enough said about that one, but that's just a real good outdoor, nothing fancy, bull strong, get the job done knife, and I wouldn't hesitate to take that anywhere. If I could only have one knife for whatever reason, God forbid, and I had to go out somewhere and I had to be out there for an indefinite period of time, that would be the knife I would take. So from here on, this is the one that was my belt knife for years. I don't carry it much anymore, more for sentimental value. I made this knife, made the sheath and everything. This buckle is inconvenient, but I just thought it was cool because at the time it was very nice and brass, and then all the brass tended to it was just coated, so it's kind of worn off over the time. But I made this knife, oh my gosh, a long time ago. I can't even say when. This is my ferro rod, of course. This is the tip off a moose antler, and this piece too. This is just a piece of a file, and I cut it and ground it and tempered it and all the rest of that routine, and I've got it as my striker. I tell you something about big ferro rods like this, and I see a lot of people that carry, you know, the little ferro rods that are like the size of a pencil and about 2 inches long, and they work great. There's nothing wrong with that. But up here, and I've said this in other videos, and I'm sure I'll say it a whole lot of times again, cold is everything up here. You know, when it gets to be 30 and 40 and 50 below in the wintertime, the wind is howling, and I can't even guess what the wind chill factor might be. If you're in a situation where whatever happens and you need to get a fire going quickly, and your hands are numb and half frozen and the wind is howling, you're not wanting to be out there with a teeny little ferro rod, you know, trying to hold it in your frozen fingers and scrap. You want something that you can get a grip on, even with your mitts on, with your frozen hands, and, you know, and run your knife down it and have a heck of a good grip on it, because, you know, in situations like that, you're not functioning 100%. Your hands don't have the grip, they're half frozen, you don't have the feeling. You just don't want to fuss with nitsy little things. So, you know, bulk and brute strength up here isn't just for the sake of the brute strength, although that's always nice, but it's also because you got a real good grip on things. Anyways, go back to the knife. This is actually an awesome knife. This thing works perfect for just, this is about as close, honestly, to a one knife option as I've ever had. It's got the deep belly for whatever carving you want to do. It's quite thin. It's only about, geez, I don't even think it's, well, 16th or whatever. This was made out of a big circular saw blade. So it's very, very good quality steel. Another piece of moose antler, of course. I left a little piece on the end there. There's another thing here I should have mentioned here too, with the lanyard hole. I'm a huge fan of lanyard holes, and I'll tell you why. Around here, as I've said before, I travel a lot by boat and canoe and so on. If you're working in your boat, around your boat, on a dock, near the edge of a stream, wherever, you know, I'll put a lanyard on. I don't like having a lanyard here all the time, but I'll put a lanyard on there and put it around my wrist, because, you know, you drop your knife in 10 feet of water, and the water here, even in the middle of the summer, is wicked cold. That's why so many of the local people up here have never learned to swim, because even in midsummer, the water here is still bone chilling cold, and hypothermia is just right there. So you drop that knife in, you know, where you can't just reach down and get it, and it's pretty much gone. So, you know, I like to have, and you know, that's a very real possibility. I like to have a lanyard where I can clamp it around my wrist anyways. This has got about a 4.5-inch blade. Because it's a saw blade, it's wicked sharp. This thing really takes a sharp edge. The other thing about lanyard holes, again, is a lot of times in the wintertime, you know, snow here is waist deep easily. What I'll do is I'll take a colored piece of paracord or something, a bright color, something, you know, like that, and I'll put a piece on here, not so much as a lanyard, but more like a tail. You know, and it might be like 3 feet long. Because if you're working away and something happens and you drop your knife and it drops down into the snow, boom, it's gone, you know, and it's down 2 or 3 feet, whatever, down, and you're looking around trying to find it, and you're scraping snow over the hole that it went down through, and you can inadvertently bury it while you're looking for it. But if you've got, you know, a couple of feet of tail on here, just anything, you know, that's semi-durable, like I said, anything that's a bright color, paracord or any kind of string or anything else, piece of ribbon, anything, it's going to leave that tail sticking up in the snow and make it a whole lot easier for her to find it. So that's a good way to use those lanyard holes, even though, like I said, I don't generally use a lanyard on a regular basis, and I don't really like it hanging off of there on a regular basis, but I do keep a little piece in my pack just for those reasons that I mentioned. So I'll put this away here. So this is a homemade knife. Most of my stuff is homemade, actually. Next on my list is another little knife. This is also homemade, again with the bone handle. These handles are cool because, as you can see, they're starting to yellow with age. This, again, is just made out of a file. This one's made out of a file. Very, very faintly. Well, you won't be able to pick it up on there, but very faintly you can still see where the file marks were on it. Kind of a, get away from me. Kind of a, boy, these files, I'll tell you, these files and these knives that are made out of saw blades, holy smokes, do they ever hold an edge? My golly, this little knife is just nasty sharp. If ever I was going to be cautious about using a knife to be sure that I didn't hurt myself, this would be for sure one of the ones, because, you know, I didn't put any kind of a guard on it here. The edge comes right here, and this thing is just stupid sharp. So, and it certainly, and a square stem always on the spine, so it definitely will scrape a ferro rod real good. I mean, these things, this is the same, actually it might even be the same piece of material, same file, I don't recall now, but you know, these things will throw some serious sparks off of these ferro rods. But I should get more paint off that, but they work real good, and you never know. I mean, this is a great little knife just to use for whatever you want around around the fire, a little bit of anything. And it's small, because these are so easy to carry around with you that, you know, no problem. Another one that I've made, which doesn't fit, I'm getting bit up here. This is another knife that, actually this knife is another knife that I carry all the time. And I'm a big fan of axes. Up here in the north, you know, axes are a great thing to have. I made this one as well. This needs a little cleaning, obviously. It's been out in the bush a fair bit. This is a piece, now this is stainless steel. This is a piece of 400A stainless that I got. This micarta handle is what I made. This is out of various different colors. I'm going to call them blue jeans, denim I guess. But there was black denim pants and brown and green actually. And I got these at one of the second-hand shops for I think $1 a pair or something like that. And what I usually do with those, I should make another video out of that, is I'll cut them off at the knee, or thereabouts, and I'll stitch the cuff together on the bottom, and you got a bag. And they're a good durable bag. But then all the bits and pieces of scraps that you have left over, you just cut them up into strips, you know, whatever, and use the resins and make yourself these scales, and then put it together with the brass pins, the same as I did with these other ones. And this little thing, it's 3/16 of an inch thick. And this thing, I designed this around the idea of another one that I've made, which is, I don't know if it's in here or not, maybe not. No, it's not. I'll have to show you another time. Oh no, here it is. Yep. This I made many, many years ago. And this needs cleaning. Again, I got a thing for antler handles and brass pins. But you know, you see these, you look at what the natives do. And it, you know, or like from 100 years, 200 years ago. And it doesn't matter what category you're talking about, you know, they lived it for thousands of years. So what they did had to work. So, you know, you've seen the natives doing their fish and all this stuff, the Inuit and so on. And it worked great for them. So, you know, by duplicating something like that, you know, maybe redesigning it slightly for your own purposes, but basically by duplicating things like that, you can see how old this is. I've had this thing for an eternity. I made this when I was probably in my 20s. This is a newer handle, but the actual blade I made probably when I was in my 20s, and then I had to then the wooden handle deteriorated eventually, and then I rehandled it with this here several years, probably 10 years ago. But yeah, you know, these things are just a great knife to carry for, you know, you watch the Inuit clean fish and seal and everything else with them. So as much as I'm not likely to bump into many seals around here, just a real good knife to have, almost like a butcher knife. And I kind of designed this in a similar sort of a style. And you know, this being heavy like this, you know, you can chop real good with it. It's got a real good edge on it, so you know, you could fillet a fish, or with this deep belly on here, you could certainly use it for skinning. So again, and it's heavy enough, unlike some of these knives here, even this cold steel one, it's heavy enough that it makes a pretty fair chopper. It's not long, but you know, there's enough weight to it. It's not overly heavy, but the balance is pretty nice, just a little bit blade heavy, so it makes it for a good chopper. And this thing works super good, and I've carried this with me. Again, you know, a lot of these things I've made years and years ago, and I've made others since then, of course. But I mean, these things lasted so long, and they're so sturdy that any of the new ones I made for people who wanted something similar, not because I needed to replace anything for myself. So, you know, these are all, everything here. Well, this is the newest thing I've got. Can't count these because I don't use them. And this is about 5 years old. Actually, this cold steel is about the same. Everything else here is probably close to 20 years old, and some of it more than that. And last, here, this is my little neck pouch that I carry with me, my survival kit, I call it. And it's actually not a half bad little survival kit. I made the little pouch to fit around my neck. And in here I've got my fixed blade knife, I've got a fire steel, and I've got a little bit of tinder that I carry. And all that in this little pouch, and it's like, doesn't weigh anything hardly. It's nothing. But you know, everything in here, despite its tiny size, does the job. So first I keep this here, just a little bit of cotton ball. There's 2 or 3 cotton balls in here, soaked up with Vaseline, in a little tiny Ziploc. And you know, if you're a little bit cautious, you could start several fires with this. And once you got one fire going, then hopefully you'll keep it going, and maybe keep the embers from that to get your next fire going. Next is my little ferro rod. Not very big, but again, you know, these things do the job. It does anyway. A little coarse, but yes, you know, in a pinch, that would do the job. Actually, would do a good job, I'm sure. Again, it's this, you know, you're kind of holding it like that, where if it was really cold, I'd rather have something to grip, you know. But hey, I would take this over nothing. And then my little fixed blade is this guy, also made out of a saw blade, and it looks like you wouldn't get much of a grip on it. I've resharpened this thing so many times and used it so many times that I really need to clean up the bevel here because it's kind of multi-dimensional now. But this little thing I made, well, this one might be a little newer. I made this probably about 8 years ago. But if you hold it like this, one finger here, one on the top, one here, it's surprising between, you're pinching it between your fingers. It's amazing how much of a grip I mean, you can really dig in with this thing. Now, you know, it's strictly sort of a survival purposes little knife, because somewhere, you know, if you've got something sharp like this, you know, you could gut a fish with it. You know, is it as convenient as that? Obviously not, but it's sharp as heck. You know, again, these saw blades take a wicked edge. You could butcher a moose with it. Now that sounds silly when you think about it, but I'm not talking about butchering it like splitting it in half and butchering it like you would a cow or something. But I'm talking about, could you peel enough hide back to get to the meat underneath and then, you know, slice off some strips of meat? Yes, of course you could. It might take you a week to hack your way through them, but you know what? You'd get her done eventually. I'm not talking about quartering it and like I said, and carving it into roasts, but as far as being able to peel back, you know, a chunk of hide, split it down and peel it back and carve off a few slices of meat when you're starving, this would definitely do the job. So, you know, again, it'll do whatever you need it to do in a very tiny way, and it's not quick and it's not the most efficient, but it sure is a whole lot better than not anything at all. And it just sits right in here, and it doesn't take up any space. There's no weight to it. And it goes around your neck and you're done, you know, that's all there is to it. And then when it puts on, I'll show you here in a second, I turn it so that it fits in like that, and then this piece that goes through hooks over the finger part and pulls tight in the finger groove there on the back, so it actually keeps it from falling out. Now it's not going to likely fall out hanging vertically on your belt, but that wraps really quite tightly around this little tip that was at the back here. So when you snug that up a bit, that thing is locked right in there. I mean, you know, you'd have to do something pretty dramatic to flip your canoe and bounce off the rocks a few times before you're likely to cause yourself to lose it. You're more likely to break the strap, I suppose, but that's a pretty heavy leather strap out of moose hide, so this stuff's not really going anywhere. So those are the basic knives that I have. I have a few other knives which, like these, are strictly knives that are, you know, something unique that I saw that I never intended to use, but I just like the looks of them. Put them in a case and enjoy being able to look at them from time to time. But the homemade knives here are absolutely, that's not homemade, every bit as durable and strong and good and functional as anything that you can buy at the store, as long as you get, you know, good quality steel and the tempering is done right. You know, you really want to temper them properly, but these things work great. And I think, you know, again, I see people, you know, they've got to have everything new, and then another new one comes, and they've got 69 knives because, you know, some new model comes out and it's so marginally different than what they've already got that you can't help but say, you know, good grief. I mean, if you just love knives, have 1,000 of them. What's the difference? But as far as, you know, for I live way out in the bush here, and you know, this is a working tool for me for a day-to-day basis. I spend all my time outdoors. I fish, I hunt. My job is outdoors. I mean, I live outside except for excuse me, getting bad too. Except for sleeping, and even then, sometimes you just don't always make it back home for a nap. But any of these knives here, like, get a good quality knife. It doesn't have to be expensive. Something like these SRKs, 60 bucks. I know there's SEs that are costly, but very high quality. The Becker BK279, whatever, if you like big blades. But get a knife, get a good one. Doesn't have to be an expensive one, just something that's a good, reliable quality. Preferably, in my personal opinion, not stainless steel. I prefer carbon. It's a little bit more maintenance. You got to make sure you keep them oiled up and cleaned, and you can't let them sit. That's you can't let them sit in a leather sheath too much because the leather holds the dampness and it'll really get them going. But other than that, they're just about unbreakable if you got a good one. Like I said, this thing is a breaching tool. You know, 3/16 of an inch thick on a blade that's now 5 5/8 inches long or 5.5 inches long. 3/16 of an inch thick and a well-tempered piece of 1095 steel. This thing is an absolute pry bar, and you would have to do something absolutely stupid to really cause this knife to fail completely. So, you know, as far as like I said, on a survival situation, I wouldn't hesitate to take that knife. Any of them really, but not so much that one. But that thing for sure, and this one here, and definitely this one. These things are all absolutely excellent. So get yourself a good knife and then use it. You learn to handle it, learn the balance of it, the feel of it, learn how to really make it do what you want to do. Keep it sharp, keep it clean. And the more you use that knife, the more natural it's going to feel in your hand. And you know, it doesn't have to be a $200 knife to feel natural in your hand. It just has to be a good knife, and it has to be one that you use constantly. Well, folks, I want to thank you for joining me. It's always a lot of fun to get out and spend some time doing this sort of thing. And one of the reasons I started this channel is just basically that I was hoping to be able to share some of the years of experience that I've had and some of the ideas that or opinions, I guess, that I've developed. They're not right for everybody, but you know, I tend to you know, really focus on form over, or function over form. You know, I want something that works, something that's reliable, something that's going to get the job done, not let me down. And you know, if it looks nice, and you know, you get knives like this one here that you know, you see in the video. Kind of a nice looking knife, not very practical, certainly not one I would want to carry out into the bush, but you know, these things are nice to just have if you like it. Put it on a shelf or display case or whatever, and just enjoy looking at it, because you know, it's a very cool knife. It's got, you know, a nice Indian carving in the handle part there, and it's just a nice looking knife to have around. Could I take it to the bush? I could, you know, but it's hardly the one you want to take. This one, on the other hand, this Cold Steel, is well, it's a little polished up right now because I just did the work on it that I'm talking about in the video, but it's not really a knife. It's just a plain knife. It's a rubber type craton handle. There's nothing fancy about it, but it's just bolt strong, and you know, just a good, reliable, down to the earth knife, you know. Anyways, I want to thank you for joining me. If you've enjoyed this, please share it with other people. Subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, by all means, feel free to put them in the video's comment section below. And hopefully we'll see each other again soon.